The first thing Sergeant Dara Okafor noticed when the Vale warship locked onto Station Meridian was that the coffee was still hot. She had just poured it. Her third cup of the shift, black, no sugar, the way her mother had always taken it. And the mufug was sitting on the console beside her right hand when every proximity alarm on the station screamed at once. The sound was not loud. It was the kind of sound that went into the body rather than past it. A low-register pulse that turned the stomach liquid and stopped thought mid-sentence. She had heard it in drills. She had heard it twice for real, both times for debris. This time was different. She knew it was different before she looked at the screen. When she looked, the screen confirmed it. The Vale ship was approximately 4 kilometers off the station's port docking collar, sitting in the dark between two communications relay satellites, like a needle resting in black silk. It was not moving, it was not broadcasting. It was simply there. The way something enormous and patient is simply there. The way a wall is there when you walk into it in the dark. Its hull was a dark copper color, oxidized at the edges to something almost green, and it was far too large to have arrived without the station detecting its approach. Which meant it had not arrived, it had simply appeared. Station Meridian was not a military installation, that was the thing. It was a joint international research and logistics hub. 342 crew from 11 countries, scientists and engineers and support staff. A rotating population of visitors on temporary assignment. It had 2 emergency personnel, herself and Corporal Riku Tanaka, both technically attached to the ESA Security License Office, which had never expected to be relevant to anything more threatening than a fistfight in the commissary. The station's defensive systems amounted to 2 decompression bulkheads, a set of emergency airlocks, and a document that Okafor had read once and largely forgotten. She picked up her coffee and drank half of it in 2 swallows. Then she hit the all-station alert, opened a channel to Earth and began to talk. This is Sergeant Dara Okafor, Station Meridian Security timestamp 0742 UTC. We have a confirmed unknown vessel in close proximity to the station. No communication received. Vessel does not match any registered profile in the navigation database. Vessel is stationary. No hostile action observed at this time. She paused. Requesting immediate contact with Mission Control, UNUSA, and whatever military entity is relevant to this situation. Please advise. The signal delay to Earth was 14 minutes each way. She had 28 minutes to wait for an answer. Assuming anyone on Earth was awake and listening. Tanaka appeared in the doorway of the operations module 3 minutes after the alert, still pulling his jacket on, his hair pushed sideways from sleep. He was 26 years old, and had been stationed on Meridian for 4 months, and had the kind of face that looked permanently surprised. He looked at the screen, he looked at Okafor, he looked at the screen again. Is that? Yes, and they haven't no. He pulled his jacket the rest of the way on and sat down at the secondary console. What do? We wait, Okafor said. And we document everything. She was already documenting. Every reading from every sensor array the station possessed, logged and time-stamped. Electromagnetic signature, mass estimate, thermal output. The Vale ship, she was calling it that because it had to be called something, and the shape of the hull, the specific curve of it, matched the grainy reconnaissance photographs that had been circulating through classified channels for the past 7 months. Radiated almost no heat. Whatever was powering it ran cool in a way that made no physical sense, like a fire that gave no warmth. It drew no energy from any measurable source. It sat in the dark and it waited, and the waiting felt deliberate. 40 minutes after the first alert it moved, not toward the station, parallel to it, slow and almost courtly, sliding along the port side at a distance of roughly 2 kilometers. It was the most disturbing thing Okafor had ever seen a large object do. It was like watching a whale inspect a boat from underwater. The sense of something enormous, taking the measure of something it could destroy without effort, with no particular hurry. The station's resident physicist, a compact man from Osaka named Dr. Hideo Matsumoto, arrived in the operations module uninvited and stood at the back wall with his arms folded, watching the screen with an expression of such concentrated attention that he looked almost angry. It's mapping us, he said. You think? The movement pattern. It's systematic. It's going around the station the way you'd walk around a car you were thinking about buying. He unfolded his arms long enough to point at a readout. Also those pulses. Every 90 seconds, that's not communication. That's a scan. What's it looking for? Matsumoto was quiet for a moment. Weaknesses, he said. Or inhabitants. Hard to say which is worse. The channel to Earth crackled at the 2-hour mark. The response was a recorded message from someone whose title was Director General of the UN Office for Outer Space Affairs, a man Okafor had never heard of, speaking in a measured voice that had been carefully constructed to communicate authority without panic. He told her to maintain position, avoid provocation, and attempt no communication with the vessel until a proper diplomatic team could be assembled. A diplomatic team, Tanaka said flatly. Apparently, from Earth. From Earth, with a 28-minute signal delay. At minimum, he thought about this. Great, he said, and went to get himself a cup of coffee. The diplomatic team never got a chance to be assembled. At hour 3, the Veil ship stopped moving. It had completed its circuit of the station and had returned to its original position off the port docking collar. Then, with no warning, no communication, no signal of any kind, it reached out, not physically. The reaching was something else. A signal or a field or a quality of attention, so focused it registered on the station's sensors as pressure, an actual physical reading, a fraction of a Pascal distributed across the outer hull. Later, when Okafor tried to describe it, she would say it was like being looked at, not observed. Looked at. The difference between a surveillance camera and a pair of eyes. Every powered system on the station flickered, not off, not destroyed. Flickered, like something was sampling them, tasting the current. The lights went down and came back up. The environmental systems hiccuped once. The communications array lost signal for 11 seconds and then restored itself. The only system that did not recover on its own was the re-entry authorization module, the encrypted subsystem that handled the unlock codes for the emergency descent vehicles, docked at the station's lower collar. 6 descent pods, enough to evacuate a third of the station's population in an emergency. They required a rotating 24-character authorization code, updated every 12 hours to prevent unauthorized launch. The code changed, not reset to a default, not corrupted. Changed. Replaced with something new, something that was not in any format the station's systems recognized. A string of characters that were neither the standard alphanumeric sequence nor any recognizable corrupted variant. The descent pods were locked, not broken, locked from the outside, by something that had reached through the station's encrypted protocols, the way a hand reaches through smoke. Okafor stared at the authorization module for a long time. Then she called Matsumoto back to the operations module. They locked the doors, she said. The descent pods. Yes, he studied the readout. This isn't a malfunction, he said. No, this is deliberate. Yes, they want us to stay. He said it, the way you said something when you were working out whether it was interesting or terrifying and had not decided yet. Then he decided that's not good. No, Okafor agreed. It is not. She sent another message to Earth. She explained the situation in the flattest, most precise language she could manage, because precision was the only tool she currently had. She laid out the facts. The descent pods were locked. The station's 342 crew members were now unable to evacuate. The locking mechanism appeared to have been applied externally through a means that bypassed the station's encryption entirely, and they had now been in proximity to the vessel for 3 hours and 8 minutes without any form of communication from the vessel. While she waited for the response, she walked the station. She did this methodically, corridor by corridor, the way she is trained to walk any space she was responsible for. Not quickly, not with any particular urgency that the crew might misread as panic, but steadily and with attention. The station had 11 residential modules, 4 laboratory blocks, a commissary, 2 medical bays, a machine shop and a greenhouse that had been added in the second expansion and smelled of wet soil and basil. She walked all of it. She watched the faces of the people she passed. What she saw was this. People were afraid, and they were managing it. That was the thing about 342 human beings in a tin can in the middle of nowhere. They had been doing that their whole careers. Every person on Station Meridian had spent years learning to be afraid of things and manage it anyway. Because the alternative was going home. They were not calm exactly, but they were functional. A team of biologists in Lab Block 3 had covered their whiteboard with equations and were arguing loudly in 4 languages. A pair of technicians in the machine shop were pulling apart a backup thruster assembly for reasons that were not immediately clear, but that had the unmistakable quality of people who needed to be doing something with their hands. In the commissary, a group of 6 crew members from different countries who did not share a common language were sitting together eating the same meal in silence, and Okafor found that she could not look at them for very long. Without feeling something she did not have a word for, she stopped at the greenhouse. There was a woman there, Dr. Amara Cohn, the station's botanist, Malian French, in her late 40s, who had been on Meridian for over 2 years and who Okafor knew by sight but had never spoken to at length. She was watering something in small pots at the far end of the module, not because the plants needed it. The automated irrigation system was running fine, but because she was doing it with her hands, tilting the small can slowly, watching the water dark the soil. "Surgeon," she said without looking up. "Doctor Cohn, you're doing rounds." "Yes. How bad is it?" "The pods are locked," Okafor said. "We're working on it." Coney nodded slowly. She kept watering. "When I was a child," she said, "my grandmother used to tell a story about a river that dried up. The whole village thought they would have to leave. But one man, old man, nobody thought much of him. He started digging. Just started digging, right there in the dry riverbed. Everyone thought he was crazy." She paused, tilting the can a final time. "He found water." Okafor looked at her. "Just thought I'd mention it," Cohn said, and went back to her watering. Okafor went back to the operations module and sat down and started digging. The descent pod lock was not a hole in the station's security system. It was the station's security system turned inside out and used against them. Whoever had done it, whatever had done it, had not bypassed the encryption. It had engaged the encryption from the outside, using a key that the station did not possess. The pods were locked the way a safe is locked. Not broken, not forced, simply secured against anyone without the combination. The combination existed somewhere. Okafor was certain of that, the way she was certain of things that mattered. The lock had been applied, which meant a lock had been designed, which meant the thing that designed it thought in terms of locks and keys, of access and denial, which was information, which was something to work with. She pulled Matsumoto Tanaka and a communications engineer named Dr. Priya Siddharth into the operations module and put the problem on the table. "They used our own encryption format," Siddharth said, 20 minutes into the analysis. "Not identical, but the structure is the same. Base 256 layered handshake, rotating salt. They read our systems," Matsumoto said. "When they scanned us, they read the architecture. And then improved on it," Siddharth said, with the particular tone of someone who was professionally offended. "This key structure it's more elegant than ours. There are maybe 2 people on Earth who could have designed this, and they work for different agencies and would not cooperate on principle. They learned our lock," Tanaka said slowly, "and built a better one." "Yes, in 3 hours, apparently." There was a silence. Okafor let it run for a moment, because silence sometimes did the work that words couldn't. "Then we build a better key," she said. Everyone looked at her. "They used our encryption format as a base," she said, "which means the key is expressible in terms our systems can read. It's not alien data, it's our data enhanced. There's an upper limit to how complex it can be and still function as an authorization code for our pods. The pods' onboard computers have to be able to verify it." She pulled up the lock code on screen. "It's big, but it's not infinite." "You want to brute force it," Siddharth said. "I want to analyze it. There's a difference. Brute force would take longer than our oxygen holds out. Analysis looks for patterns." She looked at Siddharth. "You said it's elegant." "Yes. Elegant things have structure. Structure has rules. Rules have exceptions." She looked at the code on screen. "Find the exception." Outside, the Veil ship continued to wait. At hour 6 it moved again. This time not along the hull but away, increasing its distance from the station slowly, 2 kilometers becoming 3, 3 becoming 5, 5 becoming 8. Not retreating. Withdrawing to a better vantage point, the way you step back from something to see it whole. The message from Earth arrived 4 minutes later, 28-minute delay accounted for. This time the voice was different. Not the Director General, but a woman who identified herself only as General Reyes, and who spoke in a voice that did not sound like it had been carefully constructed at all. It sounded like someone who had put down several other conversations to make this one. "Surgeon Okafor, we are aware of your situation and we are mobilizing a response. We need you to understand 2 things. First, we cannot reach you before approximately 72 hours from now. That is the realistic timeline for any vessel we can get airborne and to your position. Second, the Veil have not engaged this kind of tactic before. We do not know what they want. We do not know why they locked the pods. Every scenario we have run suggests that the most dangerous thing you can do right now is either attempt to communicate with them or attempt to force the pods open. We are asking you to sit tight." A pause. "We are also asking you, because you are there and we are not, to use your judgment. Good luck. 72 hours." The station had oxygen reserves sufficient for approximately 90 hours at current population consumption, assuming no additional draw from activity. It had food stores for weeks. It had water recycling that was effectively indefinite. The oxygen was the number. 90 hours minus 72 left 18 hours of margin, assuming the rescue arrived exactly on schedule. Okafor pulled up the life support readings and looked at the number for a long time. Then she implemented a partial rationing protocol. Not full emergency reduction, which would alarm the crew and consume morale, but a 15% reduction in circulation that most people wouldn't notice consciously. She routed the saved air into the reserve tanks. She did this quietly, the way her grandmother had stretched groceries at the end of the month. A little here and a little there. And said nothing about it to anyone who didn't need to know. By hour 9, Siddharth had found something. She came into the operations module with the look of someone who had been awake for a very long time and was running on something more efficient than sleep. The particular electric quality of a mind that had found a thread and is pulling it. The key has a rhythm, she said without preamble. I've been running spectral analysis on the character sequence, and there's a periodicity in the construction. Not obvious, it's buried under 3 layers of deliberate obfuscation, but it's there. Every 47th character, the selection logic shifts. It's like a breath. Like whoever designed it had a signature they couldn't entirely suppress. Can you use it? I can reduce the solution space by a factor of about 10,000. She sat down. It's still a massive problem, but it went from impossible to merely very hard. How long, she thought. If I run the analysis on the station's full computational array and write a dedicated search routine, 18 to 24 hours. Do it, Okafor said. And Siddharth, tell me about the obfuscation. What about it? You said deliberate. 3 layers. What kind of mind builds 3 layers of obfuscation into a lock it applies in under 3 hours? Siddharth thought about this. A paranoid one, she said. Or one that's very used to being examined. One that expects someone to try to pick the lock. Yes, Okafor nodded slowly. So they knew we'd try, apparently, and they didn't make it unbreakable. Siddharth paused. No, she said slowly, they didn't. Why not? If they can read our encryption and improve on it in 3 hours, they could have made it unbreakable. One-time pad, perfectly random, no pattern at all. We'd never get through it. Siddharth had no immediate answer. She sat with the question the way the good engineers sat with problems they hadn't anticipated. Seriously, without pretending they were further along than they were. Maybe they wanted us to try, she said finally. The next 12 hours were the quietest on the station that Okafor could remember. Nothing was happening. Siddharth's analysis ran continuously. Matsumoto cataloged every sensor reading from the Veil ship. The station's engineers ran secondary checks on every system that had been touched in the initial scan. But because the quality of human activity had shifted, people had stopped waiting for something to happen to them and had started working. Not frantically, methodically. The station had a problem, and 342 human beings in varying states of expertise and exhaustion were, in their own ways, working on it. The biologists ran their equations. The machine shop team, Okafor eventually found out what they were doing. Were stripping down a backup thruster pod to see if its smaller propulsion system could theoretically be adapted to vent gas as a localized seal repair mechanism for an EVA. It was not a plan. It was not even close to a plan. It was someone who needed to think through their hands, doing the thinking in the way they knew best. In the greenhouse, Dr. Cohn had been joined by 6 other crew members, none of them botanists, who were sitting on the floor or perching on equipment stands, and doing nothing in particular except being near the plants and the wet soil smell, and whatever quality of space the greenhouse had that the rest of the station didn't. Okafor checked on them at hour 14 and stayed for 20 minutes longer than she intended. She sat on an equipment stand next to a young German systems technician named Felix Brandt, who was turning a small basil plant slowly in his hands, examining it with the focused gravity of someone inspecting a relic. I worked at a restaurant before I went back to school, he said, apparently to no one in particular, though he was clearly talking to her. Chef made me grow the herbs. Said you don't understand food until you've watched something grow. Did you end up understanding food? A little. He set the plant down. What I understood was mostly that everything takes longer than you expect and you have to keep paying attention while it does. Okafor looked at him. He was 23, maybe. He had grease under his fingernails from whatever he'd been doing in the machine shop. That's good advice, she said. Yeah. He picked up the plant again. My mom used to say the same thing about people. At hour 17, the Veil ship did something new. It broadcast. Not on any human frequency. The broadcast did not register on the communications array at all at first. What Matsumoto detected was a change in the pattern of the scanning pulses. The regular 90-second sweeps that had continued unchanged since the first hour. The interval altered. No longer 90 seconds but 47. 47. The same number Siddharth had identified as the rhythm buried in the lock code's construction. Okafor stared at the reading for a long time. "They're talking to us," she said. "Or at us," Matsumoto said. "We don't know they're aware we've analyzed the lock." 47, Tanaka said. "That can't be coincidence." "I don't believe in coincidence," Okafor said, which was not entirely true but felt true at the moment. She pulled up the analysis. Siddharth had been running and cross-referenced it with the new pulse interval. "They know we're working on it. They're acknowledging the rhythm we found." She looked at the screen, at the Veil ship sitting in the dark 8 kilometers out, at the number 47 pulsing steady as a heartbeat. "They're waiting to see what we do with it." "Why?" Tanaka said. "I don't know," she said. "But I think that's the wrong question. I think the right question is whether it matters." She went to find Siddharth. Siddharth was exactly where she'd been for 17 hours in the secondary computing bay, surrounded by the soft light of 4 screens and the remains of 2 meals. She had developed the particular hollowed-out composure of someone who had been inside a problem for so long that the problem had become the entire world. "The pulse changed," Okafor said. "I know, I saw." Siddharth was quiet for a moment. "I've been thinking about what you said, about why they didn't make it unbreakable." She turned to look at Okafor. "I think I was wrong before. I don't think they wanted us to try. I think they wanted to see how we tried." "There's a difference?" "Yes. A lock you can pick if you try hard enough is a test. A lock you can't pick is just a door." She looked at her screens. "They've been watching us for 17 hours. They can see our computational load. My search routine is probably visible to them in our power consumption and heat signature. They know what we're doing. They've known since the first hour." She paused. "And they changed the pulse to give us the rhythm. They gave us the key to the key." Okafor said nothing. "They want to see us get out," Siddharth said. "Not whether we can." How the silence in the bay was very loud. "Finish it," Okafor said. "I'm 40 minutes away. Maybe less. Then I'll be here for 40 minutes, she sat. She watched the screens, the cascading columns of character analysis, the narrowing solution space, the patient mechanical work of a human mind that had found the shape of a problem, and was now steadily and without heroics solving it. She thought about the Veil ship out in the dark, watching them the way they were watching the screens. She thought about 342 people, going about their various necessary businesses in the station around her. She thought about the basil plant being turned in a young man's hands. She thought about her coffee, cold now on the console in the operations module, and about her mother, who had taken hers the same way, black and strong and practical. She did not think about what would happen if Siddharth didn't find it in 40 minutes. She thought about the old man digging in the dry riverbed, and about water, and about patience. 33 minutes later, Siddharth made a sound that was not quite a word. It was something shorter than a word. A compressed syllable that carried more information than most sentences. Okafor was at her shoulder before the sound finished. On the screen, a 24-character string. Clean, complete, unambiguous. "That," Okafor said. "Run it yourself if you want." She took the string to the operations module at a pace that was faster than walking but not quite running, because running transmitted panic, and she had spent 17 hours carefully not transmitting panic, and she was not going to ruin that in the last 30 meters. She pulled up the descent pod authorization interface. She entered the string. The pod system cycled for 3 seconds. 3 seconds was a very long time. Then the status indicators shifted from amber to green, all 6 pods simultaneously. Tanaka, who had been watching, exhaled so completely that he had to sit down. Okafor stood at the console for a moment. She could hear her own pulse in her ears. Then she picked up the all-station channel. "This is Sergeant Okafor. The descent pod authorization has been restored. All crew should be aware that evacuation capability is now available. No evacuation is currently ordered. I repeat, this is not an evacuation order. We are monitoring the situation, and we have the capacity to leave if necessary. Continue current activities." She released the channel. Outside, the Veil ship's scanning pulse returned to its original 90-second interval. Then it changed again, not to a new number but to a pattern, a sequence of intervals that Matsumoto spent 4 minutes staring at before he said quietly, It's prime numbers. In ascending order, 2, 3, 5, 7, 11. Nobody said anything. That's mathematics, he said. That's the oldest first contact signal in the theoretical literature. You broadcast primes because primes are universal. You can't construct them by accident. They're saying hello, Tanaka said. They're saying something, Matsumoto said. Hello is a reasonable interpretation. Okafor thought about the lock and the key and the 17 hours and the 47 and the rhythm that had been there all along, buried under obfuscation but findable, there specifically so that they could find it if they were paying attention. She thought about what Siddharth had said, a test of how, not whether. They wanted to know if we were smart, she said. Or stubborn, Matsumoto said. Or both, Tanaka offered. Both is probably the honest answer, Okafor said. She sat down at the communications array. She had no idea how to reach the Veil ship. No established frequency, no translation matrix, no diplomatic framework that anyone had managed to build in the 17 months since the first confirmed Veil contact. What she had was a mathematics and a set of observed behaviors, and the same gear the station always had. She broadcast primes back. All of them, in sequence, from 2 to 127, at the same pulse interval the Veil ship had used. It took 40 seconds. The Veil ship was quiet for 3 minutes. Okafor had the impression, though she could not have explained it scientifically, that the silence was not empty. It was the silence of something paying very close attention. Then the ship broadcast again. Still primes, but this time a gap. A deliberate missing prime. A blank space in the sequence where a prime should have been, but wasn't. 59. The sequence ran from 47 to 61 with 59 absent. Fill in the blank, Tanaka said immediately. Yes, Okafor said. She broadcast 59. Just 59, on its own at the same interval. Another silence, shorter this time. 90 seconds the Veil ship moved. Not parallel to the station, not away, but toward it. A slow, deliberate arc that brought it to a distance of approximately 600 meters, the closest it had been since the initial approach. It stopped there and was still. Too close for comfort, Tanaka said. Or exactly close enough, Okafor said. Siddharth. Siddharth had followed her to the operations module. Is there anything in that movement that registers as hostile? Weapons system activation, energy buildup, anything, Siddharth checked. No. Thermal output unchanged. Electromagnetic signature unchanged. No energy concentration in any part of the hull. 600 meters. Close enough to see details of the hull with the station's optical sensors. Okafor pulled up the optical feed and put it on the main screen. The Veil ship's hull was copper dark and pitted in places from what looked like very old collision damage, ancient impacts that had been left unrepaired, or perhaps were considered marks of distinction. Along the forward section, there were structures that Okafor had no name for. Not windows, not weapon ports, not anything that corresponded cleanly to human design vocabulary. They were present and purposeful and entirely unclear. It looked old. It looked old in the way that geological formations look old, not decrepit, not worn out, but layered with time. Something that had been doing what it did for a very long time. How old do you think that ship is? Tanaka asked. I have absolutely no idea, Matsumoto said. And for the first time in hours he sounded less like a scientist managing a crisis, and more like a scientist encountering something wonderful. Okafor looked at the ship for a long time. Then she did something she had not planned to do. Something that was not in any protocol she had ever read. Something that came from the same place as the old man in the riverbed, and the basil plant, and the woman watering her garden with her hands. She opened a broadband channel, not any particular frequency, not any military or diplomatic channel, just the full spectrum, and she talked. My name is Sergeant Dara Okafor, she said. I'm responsible for the safety of 342 people on this station. I don't know if you can understand any of this. I don't know why you locked our doors, but you gave us what we needed to open them. And I don't know what that means either, but I'm choosing to take it as something other than a threat. We are not a military installation. We are people doing science. We are trying to understand things. That's probably something you can recognize given what you just put us through. She paused. If you want to talk, we are listening. We have been listening since the first moment you arrived. We'll keep listening. Another pause. You don't have to make it easy. We'll figure it out. She released the channel. Matsumoto looked at her with an expression she couldn't immediately categorize. It was somewhere between astonishment and something more complicated. That was not procedure, he said. No, she agreed. Did you think that would work? I thought it was honest, she said. And I've run out of procedures. The Veil ship broadcast one more pulse pattern. It was longer than any previous sequence, and Siddharth recorded it in full, knowing that the content would take weeks or months to parse. But the structure of it was clear even in the recording. It had the quality of a response, of an acknowledgement, of one party saying to another, "Yes, we heard you, we are here, we are continuing." 2 minutes after the broadcast ended, the Vahel ship began to move again, not toward the station, not parallel, away. A gentle, deliberate withdrawal that covered 50 kilometers in the first 10 minutes and continued past the range of the station's best optical sensors in another 30. By hour 20, it was gone from all but the long-range arrays, a fading thermal whisper in the dark. It did not come back. The rescue vessel arrived at hour 71, 1 hour ahead of schedule, and the crew of Station Meridian was alive, intact, and deeply caffeinated. The official debrief lasted 6 weeks and generated 430 pages of documentation that Okafor found largely accurate, if somewhat bloodless in its account of what had actually happened. What had actually happened, as she would later try to explain to General Reyes in a meeting that lasted 3 hours and produced more questions than answers, was something like this. An intelligence that may have been centuries or millennia old had arrived at a human installation, had locked them in, and had watched what they did with the situation. They had found the key that was always findable, had demonstrated to that intelligence that humanity was the kind of species that sat down in front of a problem and worked on it until they had it solved, that did not panic and did not quit, and did not mistake stubbornness for stupidity or precision for coldness. They had also at the end done something that none of the analysis teams could fully account for. They had spoken plainly, without strategy, without the machinery of formal diplomacy, in the voice of one person saying to another, "We are here, we are listening, we will figure it out." "You improvise," General Reyes said. It was not quite a reprimand and not quite a compliment. It occupied a specifically military territory between the two. "I ran out of procedure," Okafor said. "I improvised. And they left. Why Okafor had thought about this for 6 weeks. She had thought about it in the way you think about things that matter, but resist easy formulation, circling them at odd hours, approaching from different angles. "I think," she said slowly, "they found out what they came to find out." Which was? She thought about Siddharth bent over her screens at 3 in the morning, finding a rhythm in an alien cipher. She thought about Felix Brandt turning a basil plant in his hands and saying that everything takes longer than you expect. She thought about Dr. Cohn watering her plants not because they needed it, but because she needed to do it. She thought about 342 people, afraid and awake and working. "Whether we're worth talking to," she said. Reyes was quiet for a moment. "And you think we passed?" Okafor looked at her. "They came back to within 600 meters," she said. "After 17 hours of watching us work. After we broadcast mathematics at them. After I gave an unprepared speech to empty space on a broadband channel." She paused. "They answered. And then they left without hurting anyone." "That's not conclusive." "No," she agreed. "But they left us the code." "What code?" "The sequence they broadcast before they left. Siddharth's been analyzing it. It's structured the same way the lock code was. It has a rhythm, a period, a findable pattern." She met Reyes's eyes. "They didn't leave us a message. They left us homework." Reyes stared at her. "They'll be back," Okafor said. "When we've done it." She was already looking forward to that, which was either the most professional or most reckless thing she had ever felt about anything. She was not entirely certain there was a difference. She collected her things, declined the offer of a car to the airport, and walked out into the ordinary morning air of a planet she had not seen for 8 months, breathing it in, thinking about primes and rhythms and the patience of old things, and about what her grandmother would have said. Her grandmother would have said, "You dug, didn't you?" "Yes," she thought. "We dug and we found water."